Heaven Official's Blessing. Tian Guan Ci Fu by Mo Xiang Tong Xiu. Read by Plant Bones. Chapter 21. Adroit Dice Solely for the Safety of One. Seeing the state it was in, Celian unconsciously reached out, wanting to pet it. What's wrong? But Hua Chang sidestepped and turned away, avoiding Celian's touch, and smacked Ming hard on the hilt. Nothing's wrong. Pay it no mind. After being smacked soundly by Hua Chang, the scimitar Ming, the cursed blade that caused all the gods in heaven to tremble at the mere sound of its name, it shook even harder. Just then, Xialian heard Feng Xin again in the communication array. How could Hua Chang use the teleportation array within the heavenly court? How do we open this door? Shi Swen cried, Oh, General Nanyang, me. I think I know how. His Highness and I suffered this trick of Hua Chang's when we were on our mission. Take 2 dice and roll them before the door, then push to see if it'll open. Xialian remembered now. Didn't he casually toss those dice around for fun earlier in the main hall? He could still clearly recall having to run so pathetically for their lives in that earthworm tunnel, and from those savage spirits. He quickly called out, Stop, don't, be careful. However, his voice never reached the communication array. His spiritual powers were probably almost depleted and would be gone by the time his message was transmitted. Feng Xin seemed to have done exactly what Su Qingxuan said without a second thought. How did Xialian know this? Because the next instant, Feng Xin suddenly swore loudly in the communication array. He cursed whenever he was agitated, and when he cursed the words were often terribly vulgar. To avoid dirtying ears and eyes, his words shall not be repeated. The heavenly officials lurking within the communication array asked immediately, General, what's wrong? Mu Qing's voice came next. He also sounded quite dumbfounded. What is this place? It appeared that he had also gone through the door with Feng Xin. Oh, be careful, guys! Shi Qingxuan called out. Different number rolls will bring you to different places. What number did you roll? He rolled a 4, Mu Qing said. Feng Xin's cursing also carried a trace of panic and terror. Xialian was worried they had met with danger. The caster of the spell was right next to him, and he had no time to worry about any reservations. He hurriedly asked, Sunlung, what is a roll of a 4 open to? That depends, Hua Chang replied. The door will open to whatever the roller fears most. Just as Hua Chang answered, Mu Qing coolly snapped. You forgot to roll first and rolled out a woman's bath? No, you fought to roll first and rolled out a woman's bath? Give me the dice, I'll roll. Hearing woman's bath, Xialian covered his face with his hands. Feng Xin had always kept his distance from women, his face changing whenever women were so much as spoken of. It was as if the female sex were savage, wild beasts to him. A woman's bath really was the scariest place on earth to him, worse than the immeasurable depths of tiger caves or dragon lakes. It seemed Mu Qing had successfully snatched away the dice, and Xialian sighed a breath of relief. However, not a moment later, the two roared again. Shi Qingxuan woefully called out to them, Generals, what did you run into this time? There was no response, only odd, burbling sounds, as if they'd been plunged into water. Everyone held their breath. After a moment, Feng Xin emerged within the array with a loud gasp, sounding as if he was spitting something out. It appeared he had broke through the water's surface. He yelled, Black March! Crocodiles! As it turned out, the two of them had hardly fled 2 steps out of the woman's bath before Mu Qing took the dice by force and rolled, and their next step had them falling into a marsh. They were immediately submerged past their waist and up to their mouths in muddy water. After fighting to get out, over a dozen incredibly long crocodile monsters swam over to surround them. Each of the monsters was over 12 meters in length and had grown human arms and legs from years of feeding on human flesh. The sight of them moving through the marsh with those limbs stroking through the water would steal anyone's breath with fright, and it was also really grossing the two of them out. Half sunken in the black marsh, the two fervently fought the crocodiles until Feng Xin finally had enough. Give me the dice! Let me roll! You didn't roll anything good either! Mo Xiang was never one to admit defeat, and he shot a blinding spiritual blast. Crocodile monster's still more decent than a woman's bath. Who knows what you'll roll next? Give them to me! Fucking! Feng Xin yelled angrily. Didn't you already take the dice? Where are they? The two had completely forgotten they were still connected to the communication array and started throwing punches again while denouncing each other's luck and dice rolling. The dice lost and their whereabouts long forgotten. The heavenly officials in the communication array eagerly listened to them cursing at each other. The bigger the better when it came to spectacle. They were less they were losing their minds trying to hold back their laughter. Some even pounding their fists on their own seats, wishing desperately they could be watching this live to cheer on the fight. Although Fengxin and Muxing's luck didn't seem very good, those wild spirits and monsters didn't really pose any danger. Xielian only prayed they would give up sooner rather than later and be released from their predicament. At the same time, he was thankful that he himself didn't roll a number that called forth any horrors, that he rolled a hot tongue instead. He spoke as he walked. I rolled snake eyes earlier. Does that mean every time I roll a two, I get to see you? As soon as he asked the question, he realized his words implied a bit too much, as if he had dearly wanted to see Hotang. But Hotang replied, No. Xielian felt a little awkward and scratched his cheek. Oh, so that's not it. I was wrong then. Hotang, walking in front of him, said, If you want to see me, it won't matter what you roll. I will appear. Xielian swallowed hard and forgot everything else he wanted to say. He hadn't had the chance to dissect the meaning of those words before another voice spoke within the communication array. Let me! Not long after those words were spoken, a blinding white light slashed across the sky, and then there was the earth-shattering sound of metal cracking. Hotang and Celian's path was blocked. When the white light cooled and slowly faded away, Celian finally saw what had flown to block them. A sword. His eyes slowly widened, his pupils shrank. The sword was long and slender, embedded deep in the ground on a slant. The body of the sword itself was still quivering from the impact. Its blade was deep and foreboding, forged from what looked like black jade, smoother than a mirror, and if anyone were to approach, they could see their own reflection within it. The blackness was disrupted by a thin silver-white line running vertically down the heart of the blade. It cut the blackness in half, like a ray of sweet love. The name of the sword was Fang Xin. A figure landed in front of the sword and said, This is your sword. After the death of the state preceptor Fang Xin, the sword he carried was kept by the crown prince of Yong'an. The one who had thrown the sword to Fang Xin and blocked their path was none other than Lang Tinzhou. It would appear that though Feng Xin and Mu Ting had failed, Lang Tinzhou managed to roll the right numbers. It really couldn't be said whether it was because of his luck or Xielian's misfortune. The only thing that could be said with certainty was the two crown princes, Lang Tinzhou had always been the more fortunate. Huatang stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He moved slightly, but Xielian immediately stretched out his hand to stop him. He said in a low voice, Let me. Lang Tinzhou blocked the road, their only path through the heart of the valley. Duel me, no matter how it ends. Even if I die at your hand, I won't ask for any other reparations. And I don't need you to ask the Emperor for banishment either. Anyone could tell that until his demands for this fight were satisfied, he would never rest. After a long pause, Xie finally nodded his head slowly. Fine. He took a few steps forward and approached the sword, gripped the hilt and pulled it from the debris. You asked for this, he said softly. After hundreds of years, Fang Xin finally returned to his hands, and it moaned softly in Xialian's grip. Standing close by, Hua Tong's eye also flashed sharply at the sound of that sword's incessant cry. With sword in hand, Xialian swung and pointed it to the ground before saying coolly, However this duel ends, do not regret it. I won't, Lang Chenqiu shouted. Lang Jinqiu was so tense, it felt like his head was going to split. Both his hands clutched his great sword tightly, his eyes focused, his breath held. His sight was locked onto Fang Xin, the sword that was black as jade, not daring to be careless for even a moment. Xialian took a sudden step and lunged forth. Lang Jinqiu's eyes focused, ready to strike, when his body froze. It was as if he'd been suddenly trussed up, and he fell heavily to the ground. He looked down to find that he was really bound. A snow-white silk band had come out of nowhere and wrapped around his body several times like a venomous snake. Lang Jinqiu had been taught swordsmanship by the state preceptor Fang Xin ever since he was young, and he revered the man deeply. This was why the moment Xialian gripped his sword, all of his attention was on him and his movements. He never noticed the white silk band that snuck behind him to ambush him. How could there be such a shameless trick up his sleeves? Seeing that Rue succeeded, Xialian instantly relaxed his tense expression and fretful heart. He tossed Fang Xin aside and heaved a long sigh, wiping his sweat. That was close. Lang Qinqiu lay on the ground, struggling to break free. He didn't know how vicious that white silk band could be, and the more he struggled, the tighter it bound him. He cried angrily, State Preceptor! What is this? Let me go and fight me to the death! Xialian wiped sweat from his forehead and replied, We already fought to the death. The thing that's binding you is one of my spiritual devices. You already lost. Lang Tinto was incredulous. How can this count? When I said fight to the death, obviously I meant using a sword. If you're a man, use a sword! Ambushing me with a white bandage. How despicable! He genuinely thought the sword was the best of all weapons, and wasn't thinking much about his words. But it sounded like a male heavenly official who was prejudiced against another male heavenly official using a white silk band. He was insulting Xialian for not being a man. But Xialian didn't care whether he acted like a man or not. He'd cross-dressed before, and he'd hung the words, I can't get erect, on his lips. Nothing could get to him. Xialian knelt down next to Lang Tinqiu. You were simply unprepared. You never said I had to use a sword, so I used your loophole. Who are you going to tell? Ambush is a battle tactic. Cunning, well used, cunning well used is called intelligent strategy. If your opponent had been anyone else, you would already be dead. Hua Tong stood not far from the two and huffed a soundless laugh, but Lang Tinqiu was shocked to his core. When this man was still the state preceptor of Yong'an, he'd always taught him about being honorable and conscientious, press forward with indomitable will, and make an all-out effort. He never thought there'd be a day he'd hear such words from the lips of his once teacher. He was dumbfounded. State preceptor, you've changed so much. You weren't like this in the past. I've always been like this, actually, Xialian replied. You just didn't know. I remember telling you a long time ago not to venerate me as an incorruptible, saintly figure, since I'm not who you think I am in your head. In the end, you've only disappointed yourself. Xialian rose to his feet. Have a good long think about it, and next time, don't fall for your opponent's tricks. Seeing that he was about to walk away, Lang Tencho immediately called out, Stop! Xialian stopped. Lung Tincho gritted his teeth and finally ground out the words. You owe me an explanation. What kind of explanation are you looking for? Xielian asked. Lung Tincho's voice quivered. State Preceptor, my royal parents and I, did we not treat the remnants of the Shenla people well? That was indeed the truth. Even after the kingdom of Xianla fell, many of the surviving citizens never forgot their roots. After the kingdom of Yong'an was established and began its rule, those people and their descendants continued to live as the people of Xianla and often clashed with people of the new kingdom. The first few generations of Yong'an monarchy ruled with force and cruelly massacred many Xianla survivors, and protests broke out. On the other side, there were underground alliances formed by the Xianla people to plot assassinations of Yong'an nobility. They even succeeded a few times. This continued on, and the end result was a deep-seated hatred on both sides. However, during Lang Tinto's generation, the attitude toward these remnants of Xianla was one of gentleness, the complete opposite. Lang Tinto's parents had wanted to unite the country of old and new, and against many Yong'an voices of dissent, the king granted a princely title, Prince Enla, to a descendant of Xianla royalty. The king even made him Lang Tinto's playmate to demonstrate their sincerity. Lang Tinto himself had viewed Xianla well and had never held prejudice from any past hatred. You, Lang Tinto said, after what you did, there were many who said there must have been Xianla forces behind the incident. Many advised me to use that as an opportunity to thoroughly wipe out the Xianla people. Hatred between Yong'an and Xianla ran too deep. Anything that happened to either side, they would deem the other the mastermind. Lang Tianqiu continued. But I overruled them all. Since you never gave me any details about your identity, I told them you were definitely not a man of Xianla. That was how so many people of Xianla escaped death and avoided genocide, because I forbade it. Of course, that was a good deed. But thinking back on it now, the good deeds he'd done made him feel all the more aggrieved. It wasn't that his actions were unjust. The deed itself was correct. He simply felt deeply wronged. He'd acted with such benevolence, but didn't receive equivalent kindness in return. Lang Tinto's tone grew pleading. State Preceptor! That day was my birthday! He struggled against Rue's hold and strained to lift his upper body. Are you toying with me? A Xianla man killed my entire family, but I still have to follow his teachings and help all Xianla people. Are you toying with me on purpose? Xielian didn't respond, and Lang Tencho continued to shout accusations. Was it because your 17th was a trial that you had to turn my 17th into a trial too? Xielian still didn't respond. Lang Tencho's anger flared and he yelled, If that was your intention, I won't let you have your way! Xielian's eyes widened at those words. Lang Tencho couldn't stand, but his eyes flashed bright and his tone turned determined, as though a roaring flame were blazing within him. He continued on, as if personally aggrieved, but also as if he was declaring war. If you want me to fill my heart with hatred like yours, I surely won't. And if you're going to force me to abandon myself like you did, I refuse. I will never, no matter what you do to me, I will never become like you. It was a declaration so heroic. Xielian was stunned just listening to it. A brief moment later, he puffed and burst out laughing, a sound returning to him at last. Lang Tencho's eyes had been flowing with fiery tears, filled with passion, but all that was deflated by Xielian's laugh. Bewilderment and anger filled his chest. Xielian clapped as he laughed uproariously. Good. Well said. Celian couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed so heartily, and it took him some time before he could stop. He rubbed his eyes. Good. Remember what you said today, that you will never become like me. Hua Chong still had his arms crossed and watched with a cool eye. Just as Celian finished speaking, there was suddenly a blast of red smoke before him. The explosion caught Celian off guard and he jolted, thinking Lang Tianqiu might have used some weird trick. He dodged away rapidly, his senses on alert. However, the blast was disruptive in sound, and it didn't and did and didn't pose any danger. However, the blast was disruptive in sound only and didn't pose any danger. There we go. When the smoke cleared, Lang Tianqiu had disappeared from where he lay. What was left was a Burueg doll, swaying left and right.